there, this is Linda and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm so excited to finally dive into making for December Daily 2024. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Hi there, I'm so excited that it's finally December. I feel like we've been building up to this project for so long. I have done quite a bit of prep work in advance of December. So if you want to see more about my starting point, I do have a video here on my YouTube channel sharing my foundation pages, or I would say they're not fully foundation pages. Some of them are, but I don't do full foundation pages. I do more planning in advance. So you can see more about that in that video. I also wanted, because this is my first video for December Daily, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of what my plan is for this year. So as you know, if you know me, I work full time. I do not have time to craft every day. I do follow the 25 daily stories, and I try to roughly have them have something to do with that day. Not always, but I don't have time to create daily. So what I'm going to do is work on this in batches a few days at a time. I'm gonna film them for you guys, and my hope is to share full process videos here. I will also share still images of my photo of all of my pages over on Instagram. So if you wanna see photos, I would recommend heading over to Instagram and checking that out. I plan to try to correlate them so the ones are on Instagram after the video comes out, when the video comes out sharing the process, the completed spreads are already on Instagram, but it's hard to coordinate when I'm trying to share so much content this month, because as much as I love December Daily and want to share it all, I don't want it to fully take over my feed for the entire month of December. Anyway, so today I'm going to complete pages 1 through 3, stories 1 through 3. I also want to do my title page, and I want to do my sampler page. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of those. But first, let's talk about my calendar here. So in preparation for December, and I shared more about this over on the Allie Edwards blog, and I have this as a free download there. I have this planning calendar, which I'm using purely for planning purposes. I don't use this in my album, but you definitely could. It was just a happy accident that the rainbow washi this year fit perfectly in here. So I put that there, and the December font up here matches the font from a lot of the main kit. So I think it would coordinate really well if you wanted to put it in your album, but I don't. I'm just going to use this to kind of map out my stories and which stories on which days. So the first day, I'd already done some of this when I did my foundation pages. So my plan was to do, it's a beginning to look a lot like Christmas and tell 3 stories. I'm sticking with that. And I came up with those 3 stories, which were that it snowed in November. So I'm just gonna write these over here. Putting up the tree, the snow in November, and putting lights on the house. So when I originally planned to do these 3 stories, my thought was to do things that kind of happened before December. And I had some ideas of what I thought those stories would be. They turned out not all panning out, and that's fine. I was not expecting to get the first snow, like real snow in November. That I don't think has ever happened before, as long as I've lived in New York. Instead, sometimes we do get snow in November, but it never sticks, so we don't count it. We had some real snow on Thanksgiving, and it's hung around for days now, and it's melted a little. We still have snow on the ground, and it's possible that we will continue to have snow on the ground until spring at this point. For day 2, my plan was to do stuff about my interior decor related to Christmas. So I plan to do that story. Then for day 3, I had originally planned to do my mug shelf and my mug collection, which is a big piece of December for me. However, that has not yet arrived. If you follow me on Instagram, you will have seen that I have a shelf that I keep my mugs in, and I swap them out seasonally, and I did already swap them out for my holiday ones. However, the mug shelf that I have was not fully working for me because a lot of my mugs are oversized and they didn't fit in it. So what I ended up doing was ordering a new shelf, and I ordered it from a guy who made it for me on Etsy, and he's located in the Ukraine. So that shelf is slowly making its way across the world to get to me, and it is not yet here. As of my last checking, it had just touched down in the United States, but in Memphis, which is nowhere near New York, but still much closer than its last stop in Germany. So it should be here within a few days. So I'm thinking I'm gonna need to move that story because I want my new mug shelf to be part of it. So I'm just gonna erase it from here. And I don't know what it is with my pencils and my erasers. They have not been working, but I don't really care if this is that pretty. Maybe I should just be doing pen and whiteout because honestly, it probably looks better than that. But so I'm thinking I'm just gonna move the mug shelf thing like here, maybe. I don't know. And I still need to look in my album and see where, you know what, I'm not gonna even write it in. I'm gonna put this down here, mugs, new mug shelf. So the way that I use this calendar is I have these lists down here. These are stories that don't yet have a date, which is fine. I don't need to include them up here yet. I just wanna make sure that I don't ignore them. So I have also had a few things. So here I'm adding in a Craft Girls Day with 2 of my friends, which will be my story for that day. I also unexpectedly got this New York City trip canceled. I really didn't think it was going to. I had a New York City work trip, and probably because I wrote it on here in pen, it got canceled. I do have another New York City trip planned here for work on the 19th and 20th. I'm still not sure if that one's gonna go forward, but I'm gonna put it in here because if it does, I will probably move what I had planned for that to those days, which is totally fine. So I'm also looking through here. So I had considered maybe taking my daughter to New York City, and this year just kind of got away from me, so that's not happening. Baking cookies is probably gonna happen on the 14th still. Let's see, this one, I'm already going to use that for here, so I'm not gonna need to tell that again. First snow we got in November, but I think I'm probably still going to want to tell a snow story if we get more snow this month, but we'll see. And yeah, that looks good. Oh, advent calendars. So I'm gonna cross this one out because I ended up not making my daughter an advent calendar this year, just based on the things that were on her Christmas list. I was going over budget with larger items, so I didn't want to spend money on like 24 trinkets that she didn't really want and not have like enough of a budget to get good things. So I'm just skipping that this year. And then I also wanted to get pumpkin one from Trader Joe's. He loves their advent calendars and they were sold out. So this year I'm the only person with an advent calendar, and I'm doing the Allie Edwards sticker calendar, but I'm not necessarily going to make that a story. So I'm crossing that one out. Okay, so then what I'm doing for day 3 is an ornament story. So I get my daughter a new ornament every year, and I gave her her ornament already. I used to put it in her advent calendar, but because I wasn't making her an advent calendar, I just needed to give it to her randomly. I didn't want to give it to her on Christmas because that would be silly. She wouldn't get to use it this year. So I gave it to her when we decorated the tree. So I'm just going to tell that story on that day. So that gives me kind of my starting point for the first 3 days. I'm gonna put this to the side, and then I'm going to pull out my album and kind of talk you through my plan here. So for my title page here, my plan was just to print a large photo to put behind there. And I didn't really want to do like a photo of me or anything. I just wanted something kind of abstract. So I took this photo of my tree, and I think that's gonna work perfectly to go behind there and just kind of have an abstract background. So that's gonna be the first thing I do to complete this title page. It'll be super quick. But I'm going to do that on fast forward so you don't have to watch me do it in real time. Then for day 1 here, my plan here were these 3 stories. So I have this from the 10 by 8 paper that says it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. And I'm gonna do these like this. And each one's going to have its own page with a flip out. And so there'll be like 3 pages for day 1, which is a little bit much for day 1, but day 1 I want to start big. So my plan for this was to do 3 stories. So I'd originally done tree, shopping, advent calendars. Like I said, advent calendars I didn't end up doing. Shopping didn't end up really happening before. I did online shopping, but I don't think it needs to be documented. But what I ended up doing were my 3 stories of the snow, in November, putting up the outdoor lights and putting up the tree. So in my craft planner here, I'm just starting a new page, and I'm gonna use this to sketch things out. I'm using these to sketch them out in advance, but this I'm gonna use to sketch out to figure out the exact dimensions that I need to print my photos. So I was able to print my photos this morning, and so I will put this one together. And then on the back of that for day 2, my plan is this Deck the Halls story. So I have this Deck the Halls card, which I want to cut out for a title. I have these numbers for 3 different stories. I have the story cards and the sketch. So I, again, used this pretty much just to make notes of the sizes of photos I needed to print. You can see I also made a note for the cover page. So that is day 2. And then day 3 is the ornament story, which I didn't have anything prepped for, but I printed out some stuff. So I have printed out all of these photos here. I print at home, so it's very nice and easy to print. Because when I'm printing these photos the larger ones take up a full page, but some of them are a little bit smaller, so I was able to add photos along the side to print for other projects to kind of save the paper, and those are the smaller photos I printed. I'm not gonna do full-size photos every single day, but that's just kind of how it started out. So I'm using most of the Ali Edwards collection this year. I also purchased the bundle from In a Creative Bubbles digital shop, and I printed out some of those cards that were my favorites. This one specifically I resized because I'm gonna use that for my ornament story, but the other ones on here were just some of my favorite pieces just to use on the paper because I wanted to print this on matte photo paper. This is on luster photo paper, so it has like a little bit of a sheen and a smoother glossy texture. Not so glossy like the super glossy photos because it doesn't leave fingerprints and it has like a little more grip, but it's still smooth and a little shiny. So I like that for my photos, and I like this matte for digital cards and elements because it pretty much is comparable to like purchased cards when I use it this way. There's a little bit thinner, but I still really like it. So I printed some of my favorites to work them into my stash here and get that one put together. So that is my setup here. I'm gonna just pull all of these things out here. And then the last thing I want to do is set up my sampler page. So the last few years I've made a sampler page, so Ali Edwards has been using these little guys for table of contents the past few years. And a lot of people have picked up that habit. I have not wanted to do a table of contents. It felt a little repetitive to me. However, I did like the idea that was sparked in my brain from something I saw, not someone who did this, but they did something that made me think of this. But I did what I called a sampler page, which is essentially where I took these like little icons that came in the kit the last few years, and I filled each one in with a sample of the products that I used for that day. So I've been doing that for a few years and documenting it in another location, not in my actual album. So just putting it like in my Project Life album or my Mini Me album, because it's kind of like documenting the December daily process, right? However, I got a little bit bored with that idea, so I wasn't sure I was going to do one this year. And then what I finally decided I wanted to do is I want to do a sampler / table of contents. However, it's not going to go in my album. It's going to go in my Project Life album like I've been doing the past few years. But basically what I'm going to do is take these 25, I don't need these ones, in this grid like this. I'm going to adhere them down onto a piece of cardstock, and then I'm going to fill each one with a sampling of the supplies I'm using, but I'm also going to use my typewriter to type out a little word of text for each one that will be kind of the highlight of what that story is about. So I will not only have a recap of this project in terms of the supplies, but also the stories, which I think is more important than just the supplies. So I'm going to set that page up and do the first 3 days, as well as put everything together. So I'm gonna go ahead and put you guys on fast forward and start putting all of these together. I will do a combination of music and voiceover depending on whether or not I have something to say, but I will also give you a walkthrough at the end of the video of everything I completed today.
Okay, so I'm starting by setting up my table of contents / sampler page. And I'm super excited about this one. I do set it up on this video, but I'm not going to actually put any of the days together. I start to at the end and realize I need to make a template because these are weird pendant shapes. I want to be able to cut paper to fit in it nicely. I started doing one of them. I didn't like how it turned out, so I put it to the side and I will finish this through the however many days I've done on my next video. This one is going to be kind of a bit of a longer video because I didn't want to speed this up too much. Let me know in the comments if you like the length of this video or if you'd rather this was a little bit quicker. I'm trying to fit a number of days in one video because it's easier for me from an editing perspective and just so you can see kind of what I'm creating at once. Right now, I'm narrowing down which paper I want to be the background for this sampler page. I'm going to crop this paper down to 8.5 by 11 so that I can put it in a standard page protector in my Project Life album, and that will be kind of my nod to my December daily album inside of that project. And so if you are someone who's flipping through my Project Life album, you will see this and get a kind of a hint that there is this other album out there. Although most people who flip through my albums would already know that, I just like that there's some sort of note to it in that album. So here you can see me trimming it down. I decided on this blue paper with the gold stars because they didn't want something too busy because these are all going to be laid out on top of it and they are going to have patterns and colors and stuff on top of them. So I wanted a background that was going to provide a little bit of contrast from the white, but also wouldn't get too busy when there were other things going on this page. I probably would have really liked if there was a solid color background, but I decided against pulling something from my stash just because I wanted to use the December daily papers and the papers do not have any solid color ones included. So I am adhering all of these down in a grid using a removable adhesive. And I'm doing this because when I'm going to be putting them together, I'm probably going to have to pull them up to get things adhered down on top of them. And this way I have it in using removable adhesive so that it's easy to move it up. And then once I finalize what is on each of these little tabs, I will adhere them down using a true roller adhesive. I'm also leaving some space at the top to add a title, and I will possibly work on that in my next video. If not, I will do it at some point during the month. Okay, so I'm just finishing up my title page and then I'm going to work on the next 3 days. So I talked about this at the beginning of the video, how I work on December daily in batches. I do a couple of days at a time, but I want to also point out that I do this not only because it works with my schedule, but it's also quicker of a process to complete more than one day at once. And that's because I can batch process, which is something I do with all of my projects, and it helps me just get more done. But basically what that means is I'm going to do the same step for multiple projects at the same time. So what I did was I sketched out days 1, 2, and 3 all at once. Then I went to my computer and selected my photos and edited and printed them for all 3 days, plus the title page all at once. Then now I'm trimming out those photos for all 3 days all at once, and then I'm going to actually put the pages together. But because I already have the photos selected and printed from multiple pages at once, it's much easier when I sit down at my desk to put them together, as opposed to if I had to go back to my computer after each spread and edit and print more photos. It also helps because I print my photos at home on 8.5 by 11 paper, and I don't want to waste paper. So I will edit and print them to get the right number of photos to fit on pieces of paper to print at once. And you don't see it here, but I did actually edit and print some photos for Project Life at the same time I edited and printed these, simply because I wanted to fill out those pages and not waste any of the paper. Okay, so day 1 I had sketched out pretty far in advance when I was planning out my album, and I knew I wanted to use this as beginning to look a lot like Christmas paper and create these 3 pages that have flip ups. I did sketch this out in advance, and I sketched it out in my craft planner so I could figure out what the measurements were that I needed to have these photos with these strips of paper. I wanted the strips of pattern paper to each be a tab, and I wanted to have a little bit of space in between each of the strips where the photo would be peeking through so that you could clearly tell that they were different tabs. One thing I struggled with was I didn't know which way the words should go. So I had originally done it where they were going to go left to right, which is how you read. And then the first one is going to be its beginning and then to look a lot like, and then the final one would be like Christmas. But I ended up going the other way because it felt weird to me to have the words facing out. So how they are here is they're going top to bottom, facing towards the spine. So you would turn the book to see it, to read it. It's hard to kind of explain. If I had the words going the other way, they'd be reading top to bottom, although it would still be left to right. They'd be reading bottom to top, and bottom to top just seems wrong to me. I feel like it should go top to bottom, but then you end up going right to left. So there wasn't really a good way to do the vertical words. Let me know in the comments if you think I did it right or how you think vertical words should go, because I really struggled with that one. So after I adhered everything down, the next step is to punch the holes. To do this, I'm just using my one single hole punch tool, and I use a clip to clip one of the page protectors in place on top of my photo, and I use that as a guide to know where to punch the holes. I do have a 6-hole punch. I rarely use it. It doesn't have very strong pressure, so it struggles to punch through anything besides just a single sheet of paper. And I also feel like it's very easy to mess up with a 6-hole punch, because if it's not perfectly lined up, you're going to end up with holes in the wrong spot, maybe not in enough on the page, they'd be too close to the edge of the paper. So I find that I have a lot more control when I do them as individual holes. After I do all of the hole punching, then I'm going to decide how I want to embellish this page. I'm going to use that green felt one for number 1 for day 1. And that's going to go on the very first photo in the front. And then I'm going to put a few additional things in between the flaps, but I wanted to keep the bulk down because I don't want my album to be overly bulky, and that one is already adding a lot of bulk. And I don't know, I wanted this page to kind of lay flat. So you can see here I'm using red line tape to add the one down. Because this is not paper that I'm adhering some felt, I tend to go with red line tape. Sometimes I will also stitch or something like that, but for this one, red line tape is going to be sufficient. I only use my rolling adhesive if I am working with paper. And with something like this where it's going outside the page protector, sometimes having red line tape is better just because it's a stronger adhesive. I'm going back and trimming all of the edges because when you adhere things back to back and you've measured and cut them by hand, they're never going to be perfect. So I just wanted to get that white strip from showing. Next, I'm flipping to the second page here, the second story, which is me and my daughter hanging the Christmas lights. I propped my phone up against my daughter's car that was in the driveway and used the self-timer or the camera app on my watch that has a self-timer to figure out or to hit the shutter and take the photo. I wanted to use one of the tags to add some journaling, and I decided to handwrite my journaling. I'm using a Tombow Fudenosuke hard tip brush pen to add some larger text, and then I'm going to handwrite beneath that some additional journaling just about these 3 stories that are going on day 1 for things that happened prior to December that fit the sentiment of it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Okay, so the last part of day 1 was trying to decide how to embellish this final photo. So the way that this spread works, as you flip the pages over, you get larger and larger photos. So this is a photo of my living room with the tree decorated. I forgot to take a photo while we were actually decorating the tree, but that's okay. I just wanted to capture the fact that we put the tree up and kind of what the living room looks like at this point in time. I wanted to put some embellishments on it, but like I said, I was trying to do something flat. There were these large die cut hearts. I believe those were in the main kit. So I wanted to use that as a base, and then I wanted to layer another heart on it. I found these heart stickers that were from, I believe, last year's advent calendar. So I used one of those. Unfortunately, I tore it a little bit while taking it off the page, off the backer, but I still made it work. And then I wrapped up this spread. I'm going to go ahead and stick the first 2 portions in my album. The last piece I have not yet punched the holes on because day 2 is going to be adhered to the back of it. I have the photo for day 2 right there, but I didn't want to adhere them back to back yet. I want to complete the spread first in case I want to run anything through my sewing machine or add any staples. I don't want to adhere them together until I'm done. Now I'm cropping down the photo for day 3 because what I'm going to end up doing is creating day 3 before day 2, because day 2 is going to be a 2-page spread that runs across the backs of day 1 and day 3. And I had a better idea of what I wanted day 3 to look like. I thought this was going to be a super simple spread, so I decided to do this one first. And that way I could build day 2 on the backs of day 1 and day 3. Hopefully that makes sense. But because I'm doing these all at once, I don't necessarily have to make them in order. I just need to make them in a way where they work together in the album. I'm cropping down these digital pieces that I printed from the In a Creative Bubble shop. I'm just going to use that ornament one, so I will crop out the rest at another point in time. I just printed other things to fill up the spread, so I wasn't wasting paper, but I picked other ones that I will use either in my journal or in my scrapbooking. So I'm just cropping them down a little so that I can go ahead and put them in my stash. Some of these were other 3x4 cards, so I'm going to add those to my stack of 3x4 cards that I have in my organizer here with my December daily supplies, so I remember I have them printed. I particularly love this little one with the squares. I think I might actually reprint that as a 6x8 because that'll be a super fun home to add embellishments and photos. So moving back to my spread, I'm just clearing out all of this trash, and then I'm going to round the corners on this ornament card. So this ornament card was originally 3x4. I resized it in Photoshop to make it slightly smaller. I don't know exactly what size I did, but I had measured at the time to make sure that it would fit on top of this photo without covering up any of my daughter's ornament, which is that Starbucks cup right there. So basically I'm going to journal for day 3 about this new ornament that I picked out for her and this tradition I have of getting her a new ornament every year that represents something that happened during the year. I started doing this for the last 2 years I've been doing this. So I think it's going to be a tradition I end up doing into her adulthood. I think it was, as a child, it didn't make a ton of sense. Or maybe it did, but I don't know. There's no rule that you start a tradition when someone is a baby. You can start it at any point in time. However, the first year I did it was the year she graduated high school, so it was super easy to do a high school graduation one. The next year was she started college, so I did one for her college. This year I had to actually think a little bit more about what to include. I considered doing one for the fact that she got her first apartment, but I ultimately chose the Starbucks one because she got a job at Starbucks and they make super cute ornaments. And this one was pink, which I knew she would like. I decided to pull over my typewriter Olive to do some typing on top of this ornament card. Because the card is on thicker cardstock, I'm feeding in some thinner paper first into my typewriter, and I'm going to use that to work on top of the ornament card. I was thinking I could feed it like this as using adhesive, like the removable adhesive, and adhere it to that white paper, but that didn't work. So I have to have it go into the typewriter on its own. But basically I just fed it behind that paper to get it through there. Otherwise it would be too thick and it wouldn't catch properly. So this is a trick I've used in the past with my old typewriter, and I'm happy it still works. Being able to type on this with a typewriter is great. The typewriter is a little bit finicky because as you cannot undo and sometimes the letters don't hit right where you expect them to. But having this here as opposed to printing on my computer, I definitely could have printed originally on it because it was a digital card. But if you're printing on some actual cards that you already have just the physical one, this is a great alternative to get some typing in your album. Having my typewriter this year, I intend to use it quite a bit in my December daily, but not every single day. Some days we'll have computer typing and other days we'll have handwritten. Okay, so in addition to the journaling card, I added one of the die cuts that had an ornament on it that I had set aside in my initial plan for this page. I pulled a 3 from my number organization, and then I felt like it needed just something else. So I used some washi and a word phrase strip to layer on there. I don't love how the washi looks, so something to keep in mind that I kind of missed so you can learn from my mistake. If you are using washi, because it is so thin, if it is not on a completely flat surface, you can really tell. So that washi is half on the card and half on the photo, and so it kind of like has a ridge in it. It would have looked nicer if I'd used a word phrase strip because those are a little bit thicker, so it would have held its shape a little bit more. So then I'm wrapping up day 3 and I'm going to go back and work on day 2. So my plan for day 2 is to cut out the deck the halls and the 1, 2, and 3 and tell 3 stories about my decor. Okay, so I struggled a little with this left-hand side, figuring out how to get everything to fit on the page. So I ultimately decided to punch my holes first so that I would not worry about putting a letter or something where there was going to be a hole. However, I did not adhere these 2 pages back to back, but I decided to punch them out once because I wanted to have the holes line up. So I always want to punch the holes last if possible so that I could already have the pages adhered together. But in this case, I couldn't because I knew I wanted to do some stitching on my sewing machine on this spread, so that wasn't going to be feasible. Now I'm just trying to lay everything out to figure out how to get all of this onto this photo without covering up the part of the photo that has my trees on it. So my idea here was to tell the story of 3 specific little details of my decorations in my house. One of them is just going to be the overall like putting up the decorations. And then I'm going to talk about my mantle and the bowl on my table where I have ornaments. So I printed 2 small photos for the right hand side that will go inside of these scalloped cards. And this one on the left hand side is going to have my journaling on top of it. That is just going to be the general journaling with it. And then the 1 and the 2 and the 3 are going to go with each of these stories. It doesn't really have a specific order, but I just thought it was fun to kind of label that there were 3 stories this day as well. So what I'm going to do is type on my typewriter again using vellum to put on top of this first, the story card. And I had made some kind of score marks on there using my pencil to figure out where the deck the halls is going to cover up that card. So I needed to not have typing behind it. So then I'm going to use that to kind of trace on top of the vellum to see where I should type and not. I did not do very well with it. I tried my best, but it ends up working out in the end. Okay, so after I typed up on the vellum, I'm just using my pencil eraser to erase the pencil marks. I learned that the pencil eraser also erases the typing, so that's unfortunate. I messed up one of the words, but that's okay. It doesn't rub off on the vellum, so I can type on vellum. I tried like rubbing my fingers across it, and the text is not coming off. It's only with an eraser for some reason. But I guess that's a way to fix it if I make a mistake. So now I'm just going to work on adhering everything down on here. So my goal is to get all of this to fit on here. I want the one, I want this journaling card, and I want the deck the halls to fit without covering up any of my trees and leaving room for the holes that are punched on there. So I'm starting with this, placing this on here, and then I'm just going to trim off the edge and then place the numbers and the words. After I place everything on here, I am going to take this over to my sewing machine and stitch everything down, but I'm going to get the second page completed first so that I can do the stitching on everything all at once. Everything is adhered with adhesives, so the stitching is more just for decoration, but it does also serve some of a purpose because this is going to be outside the page protector. Having that extra bit of stitching to hold it in place in addition to the rolling adhesive means that these letters are less likely to fall off over time. On the right-hand side, I'm going to pick a pattern paper from my stash to adhere the two photos on top of them. And then I will also add some journaling, again using my typewriter, but this time rather than typing on vellum, I'm going to go ahead and type on white paper. So on this, you can see how when I'm adding the deck the halls on here, the letters have to overlap a little bit just to get it to fit. I did kind of mess up my typing there. You can see that I had it come over too far on that first line next to the H, which is why I had to kind of layer them on top of each other, but it does end up fitting in the end and working out. So I'm super happy with how this page came together, and I really loved the letters like this. I loved cutting them out, and I will probably do this somewhere else on my project as well because I just really loved this font, and I love the look of cut out letters that are stitched down. So for the stitching on the right hand side of this page, I am just typing on white paper. And for this, I use the matte photo paper from Epson, which is super thin. It's like regular printer paper, but just a higher quality and a very nice white. I use this to print photos and images to put in my journal, as well as for things like this in my scrapbook pages where I don't want something thick. Thicker cardstock doesn't really fit in the typewriter, so using a thin paper works much better, but using this paper, you still get that quality of a thicker cardstock without the bulk. So because I'm typing this on white paper as opposed to vellum, I'm slicing it down into strips using my paper trimmer here. And that way it's not going to be this big like rectangle of text on a white piece of paper on top of my design. Instead, I'm going to add these strips on there in addition to the numbers, which I'm adhering down. And that will make it a little more cohesive and just feel like part of the overall design. And I'm super happy with how this ends up turning out. This is something I do very often with journaling. I like to print it and cut it into strips. It's one of my favorite go-to techniques for journaling, or also to include sentiments and other types of embellishments. So it's something I'm always looking for. When putting them together, you can see I'm just trimming off the edges, and then I'm going to adhere them down using rolling adhesive and kind of stagger them around the photo and on the background pattern paper to make it fit and make it clear which photo each block of text goes with without covering up too much of the photo. Although I have those squares for each of the stories, the scallop squares, I'm not concerned with staying inside of the square. I like that it comes out of it and that the photo is contained rather than the text. And that also kind of helps that background not be so blank along the sides. You can see with the rolling adhesive, I put a piece of scratch paper down because these are so narrow. The rolling adhesive was getting on my table, which I have that happen all the time. I don't really care about keeping my table super nice. This is my craft table. But when you get adhesive on there, then it sticks to your projects when you don't want it to. So this was a workaround so that I'm not having stray adhesive all over the place. Okay, so the last thing to do is to add my number on here. And I went through my numbers a little bit quickly and decided I didn't want to put another numeral on here because I do have those 1, 2, and 3 labeling those stories. So instead I decided to pull over some alpha stickers from my stash and just wrote day 2 on it with the alpha stickers right along the edge here next to deck the hulls. And I think that that was a fun way to add in the day. I do like using a number every day, and I like mixing up my numbers every day. I think that's part of the fun of this project, is coming up with a new way to include the day. And I like the idea of writing out the word of the number instead of just using a numeral all the time. Originally, you can see I was going to just write 2, but because I have the 1, 2, and 3, I want to kind of make clear that this is the 2 for the day 2 as opposed to story 2. So I added the word day on top of it. And then all I'm going to do next is adhere this back to back with days 1 and 3. Oh, first I forgot, I added a few additional stars. These were stickers. I believe they were from last year's December daily collection, maybe even the year before, but these are one of my favorites. I go back to them time and time again. Just these simple chipboard stars. I added 3 of them on there in a little kind of visual triangle. And now I'm working on adhering these pages back to back. Like I said earlier, I could have done this sooner if I wasn't going to do that stitching, but because I wanted to do the stitching, or at least the option to do the stitching, I wanted to do the adhering back to back at the end. Here you can see what I was talking about, getting that adhesive on my table. I didn't want it to stick to the front of my page because that could definitely mess up my photo. So it's important to have that not in the middle of my desk. And then I'm going to adhere this a second page, and I will show you what this looks like in the album in a minute. I am going to, at the end of this video, start working on that final page, my sampler page, but I will kind of abandon it part way through because, like I said, I'm going to make myself a template so that I can make the correct shape, because I was trying to just hand cut and like guess where I needed to cut it, and it didn't look well. So don't mind, I left that footage in just so you could see what I'm kind of thinking, but I will fix that and share more about it in the next video. Here is a look at what I have done so far. There's day 1 with a couple of pages, day 2, which I think is my favorite one so far, and then day 3 is a simple page there. Day 4 will be on that Moments and Memories half circle page that I created as part of my foundation pages, and then 5 and 6 will likely be in divided page protectors. They will probably be simpler pages than what I did here, simply because I don't have as much time. Those are weekdays where I'm going to be working, so I'm going to keep my stories and my pages simple. So here you can see how this is kind of getting messed up, where I need to create that template, which is totally fine. I will just do that at another point in time. These 3 pages were very time consuming. I did speed this up quite a bit, and even so, this is a long video. I think this took me most of a weekend day to complete all of these pages. So I definitely was ready to put my supplies away. So I'm going to go ahead and put this away as well and finish this at another point in time. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And as always, I hope to see you guys all in the next one. Thanks. Bye.